Okay, so this is 2015, number 3, a two-dimensional array of integers in which most elements are 0 is called a sparse array. Because most elements have a value of 0, memory can be saved by storing only the non-zero values, along with their row and column indexes. The following complete sparse array entry class is used to represent non-zero elements in the sparse array. A sparse array entry object cannot be modified after it has been constructed. So that comes into play, that part right there. But something that's super important to understand is a sparse array either has something that's non-zero, or it's not stored at all. So if you have a value of 0, it's not really actually storing anything there. And we'll get to that hopefully. Definitely. Public class sparse array. So sparse array entry. This is the entries in the sparse array. So if you're thinking about a two-dimensional array, this is what goes inside them, these objects here. So this is the class that builds those objects. You have the following complete sparse array class is used to represent a non-zero element in the sparse array. There's that. Let's keep reading. The sparse array class represents a sparse array. So this is what goes in the array, and this is the actual array. Represents a sparse array. It contains a list of sparse array entry objects, each of which, so this is the maybe a confusing part. The sparse array entry, so that's everything made from this, represents one non-zero element in the array, each of which represents one. The entries representing the non-zero elements are stored in the list in no particular order. So the sparse array is a list of these things. That's the key idea. And sparse array entries, all they are is they contain a row, a column, and a value. And that value is not going to be 0. Otherwise, we wouldn't have an actual entry. Okay, hopefully this is kind of making sense. These things go inside this. But a sparse array is just a list of these things. That's it. And remember, these objects hold information about rows, columns, and their value, and that's it. Okay, continuing on. The following table shows an example of a two-dimensional sparse array. Empty cells in the table indicate 0 values. But remember, they're not stored. There's just nothing there. So what happens? The sample array can be represented by sparse array objects sparse with the following instance values, variable values. Okay, that's great. Write a sparse array method get value at. Okay, actually, I want to say something. So I'm going to look at my sparse array class, and I'm going to see that there is no 2D array in here. There is no 2D array, but we still have rows and columns, like the number of rows and the number of columns. There is actually no two-dimensional array. That's the tricky part. The sparse array is just a list of entries, and those sparse array entries have rows, columns, and a value. So this is just a list. If you have a value of 0, then it's just not included in that list. So what I could actually, to represent this, it says that list is called entries. This is inside the sparse array class called entries. So entries would look like this, or could look like this. Entries. In this case, the first entries that 0. So this would be the 0 spot. This would have, the first one would be 5, right? It would have a value of 5. But remember, this is a sparse array entry. So it has a value, it has a row, which is 1, and column, which is 1. Yeah, 1, 1, and a value of 5. Everything else is just not included. So the next thing in this list, because it is a list, the next thing is not this, but that. So we have R is 1, C is 4, and V is 4. So in fact, entries is 1, 2, 3, 4 objects. Like it contains 4 things. That's it. So there's another one and another one. So entries is only 4 elements, and they're just 4 sparse array entries, which comes from this class. The idea, though, is that the sparse array class, has a total number of rows and a total number of columns. So that's just something to keep in mind. Inside this list entries is only 4 things. So yeah, keep that in mind. Write the sparse array method get value at. The method returns the value of any of the sparse array element at the given row and column in the sparse array. If the list entries contains an entry with the specified row and column, the value associated with the entry is returned. If there is no entry in entries corresponding to the specified row and column, 0 is returned. In the example above, sparse array get value 3, 1. Hopefully you've read that. Okay, so let's move on to actually write this. And this one's kind of a weird one. So let's start out. Open up our curly brace. And what is this doing? So this is a method in which class? Let's see. It's definitely in the sparse array class because we have get value at. So I have access to entries, and I can use, once I get to an entry, I can use all this. So what does this do again? It returns the value of the element at row and column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for this row and column inside my entries array. My entries array list, or my list here. Because that's the only thing that I can look in. And remember, it has only a couple of things, even though the 2D array has a bigger size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a for loop and say for each element in entries, check the row and check the column, and see if they're what I want them to be. Because I have a get row and a get column for each entry inside entry. So I'm going to say for, and this is a for each loop, so for each thing inside entries, and remember entries holds sparse array entries, so for each sparse array entry, I'm just going to call it element, maybe entry, whatever, that gets confusing. For each sparse array entry element inside the entries list. So for each one inside the entries list, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to modify it, I just want to look at it and then return stuff if I can. But remember, inside this list is only a couple of things. So there are no, look at this, there are no entries, there are no sparse array entries that have row 0, column 2. So here, if I'm looking for this row and this column, then I can use an if statement. If, and I'm going through each entry, so element, that's going to be a sparse array entry inside my entries list, element dot get row. So if element dot get row, so I'm going to look at this one. That's the first thing I'm going to look at if this is the example. Dot get row, I'll get R. And so if element dot get row, well, I did that poorly. Get row equals the specified row, because if there's something there, I want to return its value. So I'm going to say, not capital, row, and so that's if the row is the same. So I'm looking at this. If this is the same as the one that I'm passing to get value at, if that's the same, and element if the column's the same. So this is what I'm effectively doing. I'm going to go through each and every one of these elements inside my list entries, and I'm going to see, is this what I'm passing to the method? Also, is this what I'm passing to the method? And if those match up, then what I want to do is return this. So that's what I'm going to do. Return the value. Return what? An element, but I need a way to get the value, but luckily there is a get value method. So element dot get value, and that's what I'm going to return. However, say I pass, what did I say before? Say, what was it? 0. What if I pass row 0, column 3? If I pass row 0 and column 3 here, then it's going to go through all of these, and this is never going to be true, because that's not in my list of entries, because I only have like 4 of them in this example. So if I pass something that's not actually there, that means I should have had a value of 0, right? So else return 0. But I don't want to do that inside my loop, because if I do, then I'm only going to check like 1. If the first entry is not like correct, then I return 0 and I stop everything. So I want to go through the entire entries list first, and if nothing is returned, then I can say, well, that means I don't have anything, or these didn't match up, meaning there was nothing, like I didn't have a value for whatever was passed to my method. So I can say return, hopefully this makes sense, I don't know, return 0. I feel like I did a terrible job, but there it is. Let's go through it one more time. I mean, it's already a 13-minute video. What is happening here? I have to understand that entries only holds a couple of things. It's to save memory, so we don't have to have all of these spots with most of them being 0. So entries only has a couple of things, and each of those things have a specific row and column number. If I want a row or column to be blank, I just simply don't have an element that has those rows and columns. So what I do is I go through every single element inside my entries list, and like I'm looking for the value at this spot. So if there is a value there, meaning I do have an element that has that row and has that column, that's this part. If I do have an element that has that row and has that column, then return that value, element.getValue. Otherwise, it means that I didn't have an element that had those rows or columns, which means I was supposed to return 0. But in order to save memory, we're not storing 0, so we just say, well, if it wasn't in my array list, or sorry, it wasn't in my list, my entries list, then I must return 0. So after I'm done going through the entire entries list, if I haven't done anything else, that's this part, else return 0. I should put an else there just to make it explicit. It runs the same way, because if you have the line right after an if, that's the else, if it's only one line. But just to be explicit, there you go. If we don't ever have anything in the entries list that has the row and column, oh come on, then that means we should have a spot that says 0, but we're not storing 0 in the actual sparse array, so we'll just return 0. Hopefully that makes sense. Goodbye.